was working in the area working for a company and based in New Jersey. And I used to have to fly back. And this was really before cell phones. And so I used to hub in St. Louis because we flew TWA.
Oh, yeah?
TWA.
Oh, yeah?
And I used to have there with my pager, look at my pager and then answer phone calls. Talk about old school.
That's a lot, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah, so for sure.
First corporate
I think he's gonna try to go on
when I was in
Saturday.
operations and they made us, somebody had to take the paper off.
This Saturday. Oh, yeah.
But it was one of those things here about this long,
Coming
right?
Saturday.
Because I always
Oh,
loved
yes, this
having
Saturday.
to go.
That's why I was
What
all
it?
like,
That's
no,
what
no,
it
no.
was like, well, speed
Yeah,
up.
like, no, not that way.
They would think I was cooler than I was.
No,
right?
no, no. It's just- it's
So,
Saturday.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we'll go Saturday.
my first business card, it didn't facsimile.
Yeah, I think about that.
Oh, mine didn't either. Yeah.
They used to be called.
Yeah.
Tele-
Like I couldn't work that way.
I can't
It's
remember.
very well known in the community.
Yeah, just Monday was my first day of really being.
Yeah, I mean, well, when I was doing those
It's an
things,
opportunity,
they
man.
had a 1, a 2, and a 3 day. So
Yeah.
three cities.
Now I can see that.
You just get hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, over and over. I had this boss. I worked for him for 13 years. And he's one of those people that by temperament, he just had business thing, man.
Yeah, no, I know.
And,
I turned, like, I'm gonna say,
I had to really go before he would even entertain the thought. Like, for me to leave, right? And that's why you gotta remember this. He was one of those guys, he come up to you. Hey, I need you to watch it in DC by tomorrow. He never asked,
Yeah.
he promised the guys.
Yeah, and that's it.
And if I acted reluctant, he'd find more. Chief, how are you doing? Good. You want to sit over here with the big kids? Yeah. George isn't here, but I don't want you to sit next to me anyway.
Oh, geez, yes.
How are things? Happy as if I had a clue.
Call him in. Well, you know.
I don't know.
But I have non-speaking also, I can't voice my opinion.
Speaking of I have a question about the meetings. You care about small typos or not? We won't.
As a matter of fact, I was more. What type of business did I have?
Yeah, somebody jogging around the.
Quite shy, but
Mark,
I just came.
what was the type of?
It was the word resolution. Had an S on
Nothing
it.
yet, we've got 2 different videos on it.
I only found 2 and they were very small, so don't get the idea that.
I see it, yeah, I do.
Nothing else.
Re-illusion.
It's French.
Yeah. French now?
That's what it is. No typos. That's not a typo, it's French.
Hey, I got a question, how long does this tutorial
He was in the shower.
take him last?
He happened to have
He hasn't read it.
camera.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Outside in or inside out, I can't remember, but he actually showed me.
He posted a picture for
Like, on a chair, and you could see in the background outside.
Somebody.
And I said, the same guy, with the gray sweatshirt.
Johnny, did you just do something?
There's a carnival park and.
What's that? What's that?
Just walking around, some little cars and a little bit.
Adobe sign?
Oh, that's just Adobe's picketing because you opened up like a PDF or something.
Yeah,
Anthony's thinking for him.
It's funny because.
That's the only good
Are
thing
you at the
about
bottom of
staying
this?
Yeah.
It was cold
Yeah,
outside.
I'm up,
Yeah, you're
on
right.
Hickory.
Yeah.
So, and I've got cameras out here, you know, and I'm putting more, now you put more.
Yeah, that's, I'm gonna do the same.
But it's cheap, you know, it's cheap insurance. To tell you, Okay, what kind of cameras? you put on?
It's a bling, just a cheap thing that. That's one of them. So, this is the, in sequence of time. This is him here. And he walks to the other car. That car was no, then, no, this camera is.
Oh. He's virtual
Jill's been my driver.
No.
Here it is.
You need me,
You can see it.
to run over to his house
He goes
tomorrow.
around his car. Hopefully again. Well, yeah, she came up here, saw the camera.
And this is the budget.
There's nothing else there.
I saw
Walking in
something.
the That's.
Where, did they park over at the park? Did they walk across?
No, it's a school.
Did the car just fall out because they?
At 2:00 in the morning.
And it's nicer, but one nicer on the other.
The downside is.
2 minutes.
Redo that.
You know, Tony leased his car out there. I don't know. Yeah.
He's got
So I am out. Let's talk to you about it. Also fire still alive.
Leave the car right.
You're gonna extend that start date? Yeah, I know. All right, folks, we're being recorded. Make yourselves accordingly.
Settle down. Yeah, you should.
We have Mr. Schuster.
Yeah.
He does know the night's the 7th, right? I don't. Okay, it's 7:30. Let's call the meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance. Flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Mr. Prano.
Here.
Mr. Datley. Here. Mr. Harney. Here. Mr. Thorne.
Here.
Mr. Hoffman.
Here.
Mr. Nimitz.
Here.
You're recording, Mr. President. We've got a quorum, we've got a meeting. Okay, according to the gubernatorial proclamation of the governor, we are once again allowed to have a remote attended meeting. So this evening, we've got 5 of the trustees, or 4 of the trustees in the building, and 2 of the trustees attending remotely. Looking at the screen, I don't see anybody. Do they hear me? Hello?
They'll come back.
They're come back. Okay.
There they are. They're playing hard to get.
Yes.
Gentlemen, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can
Okay.
hear you.
All right. I was just about to announce who was attending remotely and who was attending in person. In person this evening is trustee Moreno, trustee Diatley, Harney, and Thorne. Remote is trustees Nemick and Hoffman, along with the village engineer and Kyle Killinger, the public works director for Sleepy Hollow. Okay, that said, we will move to the minutes of January 18, 2022. We have a motion to so approve.
Make a motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes of 1/18/2022.
Second.
Moved by Harney, seconded by Thorne to approve the minutes of January 18th, 2022. Any comments, corrections, or additions? There being none, roll call. It is in attendance by Mr. Nimitz.
Aye.
Mr. Hoffman,
Aye.
Mr. Thorne,
Aye.
Mr. Harney, Mr. Datley,
Abstain.
Mr. Prano.
Abstain.
Okay, we have 4 affirmatives and no negatives. The motion so passes. All right, the president's report. Once again, gubernatorial disaster proclamation allows us to meet remotely again. We will continue this as long as the governor allows us to do so, or the state legislatures pass a law that will allow us to do so without having to go through a proclamation from the gubernatorial people. The other item we have got is the continued closing of the village hall to the public. Do we wish to continue another 2 weeks of closure of the village hall to the public? Or do we want to, I've seen a nod of heads go up and down. Take this through till, let's see, 14 days from now, be the 21st, say closure through the 21st, which will allow us the February 21st meeting to decide if we need to go further.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Have a motion to so continue village hall closure until February 22nd.
So moved.
Second, Diatley.
Moved by Thorne, seconded by Diatley to continue the village hall closure till Tuesday, February 22nd of 2022. Any further comments, questions, or discussion? As this meeting is remote, all votes will be by voice call, roll call. So roll call on this, please. Mr. Brano.
Aye.
Mr. Datley.
Aye.
Mr. Harney.
Aye.
Mr. Thorne.
Aye.
Mr. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Nimitz.
Aye.
6 affirmative votes, no negative votes. The motion so passes. Village Hall will continue to be closed to the public through February 21st, 2022. Okay, that's it for the president's report, clerk's report.
Nothing tonight.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, Tony. Planning and zoning, there's no P and Z report this evening. Attorney, Mr. Schuster has joined us remote. Mark,
Yep, we can't hear him.
Mark, we're not hearing you. Audio check. Is he muted?
No,
No.
Give me your sign.
Mark, we still haven't heard you. He's rebooting.
oh, there he goes. Now we can go off on the.
Isn't technology fun?
It makes our lives easier.
Mhm. No. Nothing. You're
On mute.
you're on mute.
mute.
There you go.
Nope.
Try the button on the keyboard. Turn the sound on.
Hey, Mark, do you have a mic on your computer? Want to try unplugging your headphones?
Can you hear that?
There we go. Now we got you.
Some can, some can't.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yep, 5 on 5.
Okay.
What
We'll
the
call that
situation is.
report. Did we lose you, Mark?
Yep.
We lost him. All right. Okay. Well, it's not perfect. Engineers report.
The only thing I have is just giving an update on the water main project. I've been in contact with Julie, the marking company, and they've put me in contact with all of the utility companies. So I've been in contact with them and they're looking over the plans, at least as far as location wise. So once we hear back from them, we'll be able to continue on the project a little bit more.
Okay. Any questions for the engineer this evening? There being none, thank you, Jeff. Mr. Schuster, you back with us?
I can hear you fine.
We got
We
you.
got
Hear
you.
me?
We got you.
I can hear you.
All right. Well, that's good.
He better have a report after all.
No.
Don't say no report now.
Well, I did say no report a couple of times, but there's some business a little later on with Mr. Nemec and an ordinance that we'll talk about then.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Mark. Okay, Director of Finance.
Need a motion for the warrants in the amount of $111,846.81.
I'll go. George, approve. Did you hear me?
I got
Yeah.
you. Got a motion to approve by George, a second.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Hoffman and a second by Thorne to approve the warrants of February 7th, 2022 in the amount of $111,846.81. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? Being none, roll call, please.
Mr. Harney.
Aye.
Mr. Dattley.
Aye.
Mr. Moreno.
Nay.
Mr. Thorne.
Aye.
Mr. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Nimitz.
Aye.
5 affirmative votes, 1 negative vote, the motion so passes. Okay. Comments from the public? We have any signed up on the list back there? John, could you check that one?
I don't actually work here.
I know, we can't get you out in public for once. Get you out in front of this camera.
Ask for a raise anyway.
Yeah. Mr. English, welcome back.
Good evening. Yeah, 2 quick things. One, I was hoping there weren't be any objections to me putting a few flyers on the back table about the service club, what we do, how we're all volunteers, and we're always looking for new memberships. So I was hoping I could put some on the back table for when people come to the meetings, they can maybe pick one up.
You can put them there. I'd suggest also the front hall.
Okay, I'll bring some more
When
down
people come
tomorrow.
in when we open the village hall.
Okay,
There'll be more people, likely to come through the office.
okay, great, thank you.
We'd be more than happy to put them up there for you guys.
And the other thing I was bringing up, or want to bring up is, I don't know if there's anything in the pipe for fixing the baseball field over by Sabatino Park, but the way it is right now, it's really unusable. Second base is all but out of the ground. It retains water. So when it rains, it takes days for it to dry out. I was hoping that there's some plan to maybe at least make that field usable.
I'll check with Kyle, I mean, it's obviously not usable till the spring. Do you have a date when you want it?
No, I just know that it's one of the things that kids can go to and play. When my daughter was younger, we were always down there and there are other people there too, but right now it's unusable. So I was just hoping that we could get it into playable shape.
Yeah, I'm sure we can.
Yeah, we can work on
In
it.
the past, Tri-Cities, I think, used to use it. And that's,
Tri-Cities
Yeah,
and
we'll
Park
get it.
District, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was it.
That's it. All right. Thank you, Rich.
could I make a suggestion? Since City Hall is closed, could you tape an envelope on the outside of the door with your flyers? Since no one's coming in.
We can put it on the village website too.
Or on the website, yeah.
And on the
Just-
website.
To get the word out.
Okay,
Yeah, you can leave them here. We'll put them all over the place.
okay. Thank you.
We will litter for you. Okay, no more presentations. We've got an 8 o'clock. There's no sense in keeping the representative from Northern Kane County sitting here until 8 o'clock for her presentation. Let's go right
Are you
ahead.
sure? Because I can wait another 20
We've got with us Melissa Hernandez from the Northern Kane County Chamber of Commerce this evening. I'll tell you this, the Chamber of Commerce is a little unusual. They actually come to the sites of people who receive awards to verify that they were really there and working to get these awards. So she's here this evening to check on John Florence, who was nominated last year as our Community Service Award recipient. And as you can tell, Melissa,
here.
we do keep him in the corner.
Yeah.
This year serving.
That's why you got up earlier.
We want to make sure, okay, good.
Yeah, that's why.
I mean, I was gonna start a little differently, but thank you for that introduction. Well, you know, some of you are new or I haven't seen before, or some of you, I've been here before, you guys have seen me. Not much, the last couple of years has been unusual to say the least, and I would love to say that we're through it, but I have a feeling that we're not even close. But you know, the chamber, it's a regional chamber, so we're Carpentersville, Easton, West Dundee, Sleepy Hollow, and Gilbert's. And I understand that all 5 of those communities are completely different. You guys have a very small portion of businesses in town. We have a lot of home-based businesses, and even your portion of businesses really benefit from having support of a larger organization. And so what we did during COVID was we really stayed connected with our state representatives, our local officials. When any of those grants came down the pipeline, we were making sure that they got out to our businesses as soon as possible, so they could apply for them, so that they had access to get grants, so that even if they weren't open, they could still keep their business, pay their landlords and stuff. So we kind of did things a little differently during COVID, and you know, we felt like a lot of people handled it either feeling sorry for themselves or dealing with a sick loved one, or just, you know, feeling scared about their business. And we kind of looked at it as an opportunity to highlight the companies, the organizations, your service clubs that really went out and tried to make your communities strong and viable. And so one thing that we did was we always do a community service award every year and an event. So in 2020, we were very optimistic that it was going to happen. And we had gotten some sponsors and we had the event planned. We were going to use the Anvil Club in East Dundee because they had different rooms and we could be spread out. Like, we were so creative. We were so proud of ourselves. And then they got shut down 2 weeks before our event. But what was great about it was our sponsors allowed us to use the money to buy gift cards for a recipient and for other nonprofits that were recognized through the chamber and through other municipalities or other organizations. And so what we did was we reached out to Mr. Pickett and our other communities and said, hey, who do you think should be recognized this year? So they gave us John's name, and it was really sweet. He kind of got you guys online and did everything, and we sent John a nice gift card, but that was the best we could do. So 2021 came around and we really wanted to do it right. You know, we had an opportunity to be back in person to really highlight Northern King County and all the organizations that came together. So at our dinner, we were greeted, Mr. Pickett was there. We had other village presidents there, other village trustees. We had a state senator, a state representative, members from the Elgin Community College Board. And I tell you this because we really captured that audience and took advantage of the opportunity to highlight all the great stuff that had happened in our community during COVID. And so what we had done in our community guide was put these little blurbs about some of our businesses and what they had done. And your karate studio in town was really creative during the pandemic. Ron didn't want kids to be sitting at home, not having access to exercise and engagement. And so he did some really creative stuff. And he was just one of many that really rose to the challenge and made made lemonade out of lemons. So with that, we took the opportunity at that event to highlight everybody, but then we also said to our villages, who would you recognize this year? And Stefan just said he couldn't think of anybody more deserving to be acknowledged than Mr. Florence, that he worked really hard to get you guys online, to make sure that you guys were able to stay functioning in a very, interesting situation. What you're doing here, all of this takes a lot of time and energy from somebody who's just volunteering their services. And so we acknowledged John at that event. We heard some great stories of, the type of person John was in high school. We'll let Mr. Pickett share those details with you. But needless to say, I think it was really neat because we were able to share these stories with people who could really understand how wonderful Northern Kane was. So John, the reason why I wanted to come here tonight was we had done this, we started doing this award in 2013, and we had these plaques and we had ran out of space. So I drove around and I picked up all the new plaques that will probably be displayed in Village Hall, and John Florence's name is added to it. So there you are. You have 2 spots because you were recognized twice. So anyway, so I want to present you guys with this tonight, but also to thank you once again for everything you've done for the community of Sleepy Hollow.
Well, thank you.
One, two, if you guys want to do something with it. I mean, hopefully you guys display it proudly, and the service club is actually on there from all of your efforts. So that was it. That was my long version.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna speak out.
Okay, take care, stay warm.
Have a good night.
Okay, next is the trustee report, roads and parks, Mr. Harden.
I've got a report, but I think it'd be better to kick it down to old business where it's going to be discussed there.
Okay. All right, thank you, Ed. Finance, George?
Just one thing, and Eugene, I sent the files back to you today. You got those. And you may have noticed that one was inverted.
Yeah.
I just want to talk to you about that. I mean, I will tell everybody, Eugene really, from what I've seen going through all these files, has been doing an excellent job of wading through some of the, I would say, minutia from past, years, and starting to correct a lot of challenges that I saw early on in different journals and different postings and things like that. But the one that I just want to get in there to talk to you about as soon as I can get back in is that one, and what happened in 2020 with the billings with water and sewer and general fund. And hopefully we're correcting those, and we'll have most of those corrected, correct? Am I correct?
Yep. That's what that stuff was for, was to correct that all.
Yeah, I read all that, and I went through a lot of the others, and I can see you're definitely doing the due diligence, but it must be frustrating just to see how some of the accounting was done just a couple of years ago. So hopefully we'll see a big difference going forward. So got to compliment you there, Eugene.
Thank you.
That's it.
All right, thank you, George. Water and sewer, Mr. Nemick.
Yes, I have ordinance 2022-2, an ordinance amending the regulations governing sewer rates and charges within the village. There are no changes to the sewer rate. It basically just makes some editorial changes, adds the same language that we have in water for billing of apartments, commercial structures, and otherwise. And Tony, I believe we need to fill in the date. So since there's no changes, let's just make it the billing of March 1st, 2022.
Okay. Joe, are you changing any amounts at all?
Nope.
No? Okay.
Nope. It's just basically corrections and editorial changes. There are no changes to the sewer billing at all. So I had talked to Eugene about that. He was good at what we had. So it's basically just editorial changes, correcting some grammatical errors, some other things that were incorrect, and updating it. So, and it also adds, as I said, the same, in case the apartments ever come online, it adds the same language for the apartments that we have for the water billing. And basically the sewer language and the water language match now for billing.
Can I ask a question?
We have a second?
What is this centigrade biochemical oxygen demand level?
That was in our current ordinance, and I believe looking back and otherwise that goes back to, I think Jeff Seiler had to do that. That was an illegal thing we had to do for the state a number of years ago, if I'm correct. But that's no change.
Estimate the wastewater volume by pounds of SS and pounds of BOD.
I believe that's an IEPA thing that we have to include in our ordinances, and that's been there forever.
Okay,
I shouldn't say forever. I think Jeff Styler had to put that in. So
all right.
that's well, as I said, there's very few changes.
On those nights I can't sleep, I just haven't gotten to that page yet. I was reading that and I'm like, what? We don't measure for SS and BOD, do we?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, never.
It's virtual.
It's virtual. Okay, all right, back to ordinance 2022-2. You make a motion to approve, Joe?
I already did.
Okay. do we
Wait
have
for a second.
Second, yeah, like.
Moved by Nemec, seconded by Diatley to approve ordinance 2022-2. Resolving or revising the wastewater treatment rates for the village of Sleepy Hollow. Any further comments, questions, or discussion?
Tony, you got the March 1st for the date that needs to be filled in?
Yes, yes, we do. Okay, no other comments or questions, discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Prano,
Aye.
Mr. Nimitz,
Aye.
Mr. Dattley,
Aye.
Mr. Hoffman,
Aye.
Mr. Harney,
Aye.
Mr. Thorne.
Aye.
6 affirmative votes, no negative votes, and the motion so passes. Well,
That's all I have.
all right, thank you, Joe. Police and public safety.
Just a couple things the chief has provided you in your packet to look at for future meetings coming up. So please look at those. Nothing else further from me. Chief, you have anything you need to add?
Today, I just received today some information from Barb Detmer regarding some of the requirements for the state fire marshal. I'll forward those on to the tank company that we're working with for the fuel tanks and make sure. Doesn't seem like, I read through it. I'm not an engineer, but I read through it and it didn't seem like there's anything in there that's going to cause us any issues at all. But I'll forward it on to them to kind of keep it on track.
We got a building permit just for our records then?
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
That's all.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Chief. Okay, public buildings and environment, Mr. Thorne.
I don't have anything other than to say that I'm going to next week try to meet with some of the web development outfits that specialize in municipalities and try and get an overall sense of what it would take to do business with them. And then if it looks reasonable, I'll bring in everybody else that was interested in this and we can all sit down and talk. That's the big plan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Building and zoning, Mr. Moreno.
No report.
Thank you, Anthony. Okay, we're moving to old business. Update, the tree and vegetation trimming along roadways. Mr. Harney, you alluded to.
Yep. Started off. At the last meeting, trustee Thorne and I were asked to find all information and review what the record would show in the minutes, et cetera. The tree and vegetation trimming along village roadways. And this, there was a, Public Works wants a little more definitive direction on where the board stands with that. So Mark and I met, and thanks to the clerk who provided us with ample minutes from every meeting there was, we reviewed that. Mr. Killinger, Public Works Director, came over, gave some input. We talked to the chief, fire station got some input there, and it's yours, Mark.
Well, it's interesting after talking to Chief Parman and seeing the letter from a previous chief that's in the materials here, and both are saying pretty much the same thing in terms of the height requirement and the how much gets trimmed off from the side of the road. And that's 14.5 feet tall and 3 to 5 feet off the side of the road.
Right. Minimum of 3.
Minimum, yeah, minimum of 3. Kyle's cutter goes about 4, so I guess we're there. having looked through all that material with Ed, you know, I know that there was at least some controversy at one point about this trimming that's going on. And I think that my recommendation, I think, to the board is going to be to balance the fact that we have some really particular public safety issues with this, and we also have some liability issues around this that would require that we not only do this, but that we have a way of doing it on a regular basis. And as has been mentioned, so that if Kyle's out there working, it doesn't seem to be coming from him. It wasn't his idea to do this trimming in this way. So in addition to trying to get around getting away from the liability or anything else, we also want Kyle to be able to do what he needs to do out there without being hassled about it.
At the end of your packet, there's I don't know where that came from, but I appreciate it, whoever put that in. There's a recommendation from our past chief, Chief Lanane.
Yeah.
Who spells it out, his concerns of liability and so forth in the village. I think that's an excellent point that he makes, and
actually, and to just to add to that, I mean, what he was actually saying was that if we understand there's a safety issue out there, and then we don't do anything about it, hilarity will ensue, right?
Yes.
And there's no doubt, but we understand that there's a safety issue out there, so I don't see any not doing it.
How does this impact the fact that we went through, you know, an issue last year with the resident on Sleepy Hollow Road who, and I don't know 100% for sure, but some indications are that their property goes to the center of Sleepy Hollow Road, and not to incur all of that discussion again and expenses that were addressed. There needs to be some cooperation, discussion, or inclusion of the resident and issues before we go and start. I'm not disagreeing with the safety point. All I'm bringing up is the fact that we better include individuals that live on Sleepy Hollow Road so that we avoid any issues like we had experienced at the beginning of last year.
One of the suggestions that Chief Lanane had made, Anthony, was that we mark the trees and the vegetation that needed to be removed. We could do that in that particular area and then allow the resident the opportunity to remove at their will, or we do it.
But after a period of time.
No, we go
Yeah.
through and we can
Yeah.
mark the vegetation and say, hey, this limb is at 10 feet, 6 inches, it needs to come out. And let them either remove it or we remove it.
Okay.
But give them 21 days or something
Right.
to do that.
Right, because I think, you know, in the past, there may have just been some, you know, trimming that we did not have those types of conversations ahead of time. So I'm just saying, if we include something like that, then that's wonderful, you know, because that way everybody's on the same page.
Okay, well, I mean, and certainly what we're doing is we're letting them know the sort of options that they have that the president just spoke of, but it's not as if there's disapproval, we're not going to trim this. Right.
Correct, and
Okay.
yeah, and I think that, you know, what President Pickett just stated was, you know, as a village, it's our responsibility to maintain the roads within our village.
Yeah.
It's our responsibility to maintain safety on the roads in our village. Hence, by identifying whatever part of the village the trees are on. I know in the past there were some issues with by the pool on Winmore and I think Glen Oak, where the neighbor's corner trees, the lower branches extended out, and it was difficult when you were making a left turn to go down Winmore. You couldn't really see anybody coming. And with some conversation, they actually trimmed them on their own, and they cut back, you know, the lower part of those branches. So regardless of whether it's Sleepy Hollow Road or Stevens Court or Joy Lane or anywhere, as long as we're as long as we communicate with the resident that as if that property causes the issue of safety with vegetation, I'm all for having it done and giving them the opportunity to either do it on their own or say, yes, Sleepy Hollow Village, I understand, go right ahead, you have my permission to, remove whatever necessary to meet the safety requirements that we establish.
We're not asking them for permission.
We're not
No,
asking permission.
no, we're not.
Okay, well, then I think that there definitely needs to be some conversation with residents so that they are aware that the village has the legal right to do it and that they cannot come back and charge us, or not charge us, but file a lawsuit against us where we have to come up and pay them for damages. I'm just trying to avoid that again.
Indeed. Oh, indeed.
We studied that.
I didn't hear that originally. That's why I'm bringing it up.
That's great.
Hey,
That's
Mark,
cool.
this is George. I guess any other village you look at, any other village in the county, I think they don't go to individual homes and notify homes that we're going to be doing tree trimming. We're going to be trimming, 3 to 5 feet off the, edge of the road. They just put a sign up maybe a week before, just like hydrant flushing, and they tell everybody this is what's going to transpire, and the residents have no say in the matter. I mean, it's not up to the resident. I mean, if
In this
we've got
case,
some legal,
yeah.
if we're right from a legal perspective, if there's a liability, as the chief had written in that document today about, there is a liability, not only for the village, but it could be fire or whatever. And I can speak to an incident before I moved out here many years ago, where there was a four-way, not a four-way stop, a stop sign, and there was a cemetery on the right. And over the years, they had asked the cemetery to cut the shrubs, and the cemetery had said, absolutely no, they're not bothering me. Well, long story short, there was a fatality at that accident. And one of the largest lawsuits ever settled in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and you could probably Google this, was that intersection there, because they came back and sued the cemetery, and it wound up back at that time being something like a $50 million or $75 million settlement. So, the homeowner has a liability too. So they've got to realize, but if we're just doing what's right for the village, I don't see why we're even considering asking a resident. I mean, we just notify them and just not notify them. I mean, just if we put out a notification, we're going to start trimming in a week or 2 weeks, just go ahead and do it.
I'm specifically referencing the person that owns part of Sleepy Hollow Road.
Oh,
We
she
have a-
claimed, well, excuse me, she claims to own part of Sleepy Hollow Road. That issue was not resolved. But George, in partial response to your comment, number one, most typically in any village or town, streets are dedicated and there are rights of way that are defined. That is not the case with Sleepy Hollow Road. It's not there are pieces of it that are not dedicated right of way. And one of which is at the northerly end. And there is a person there who claims to own to the center line of the road and therefore believes that she controls to the center line of the road. Well, that's a mistake, in my opinion. That issue was not litigated or resolved. There was a settlement made. So what we're talking about is trying to be proactive and cooperative with residents who have a belief of that type in order to balance the safety concerns that arise from vegetation. Also, there's no intersection in that vicinity that is bothered by diminished visibility. So that's not a concern at that location.
Hey, Mark, this is at least the third time in the same conversation, the exact same comments were made, and I believe the exact same resolution is going to be the consensus or vote of the board. So, but the one thing that has been talked about in the past, and we've never really been seriously, and I don't know what the process would be, but what would it take and what would it cost? I mean, is there even a possibility to condemn the prescriptive easement for all of Sleepy Hollow Road just to get this done once and for all?
I don't know what the cost would be. Someone would put some value on the portion of the territory that's committed to pavement and the adjacent roadway ditch and whatnot, and the village would have to pay it.
I mean, it just seems like at some point we may just have to bite the bullet and figure out what those costs are and go there. I mean, the residents that do own to the center of the road, you know, if we've all been brought on board meetings otherwise, they're not taxed on that. So it's not really.
No, exactly. They've given up the right to use by the public for a roadway, and for what, 100 years? I don't know. We haven't really explored how old Sleepy Hollow Road is, but it's been a very, very, very long time. So I'm not sure where this discussion addresses more than one person out of all the people in the village. I don't think there's anyone else that's going to contest roadway maintenance. So there ought to be some discussion with her and figure out a program that works in the vicinity of the property that she owns.
The other thing that's come up every time, which has not been up this time, but it probably will, is, and I know the answer to this, but if you'd like to tell the board, there's this idea that there's something special about Sleepy Hollow Road and the Pleasure Driveway ordinance that preserves the vegetation or otherwise.
I don't believe that to be the case. The Pleasure Driveway regulations are aimed at other things.
Can you speak to what those are aimed for, or what the main thing that they cover is for the board?
For what?
The Pleasure Driveway ordinance, what it does cover. I mean,
well, that prohibits trucks.
Okay.
And curb cuts.
Curb cuts and speed
curb
limit.
cuts, but doesn't really. It was, I think, the unspoken hope of the proponents of that measure that it did invest the roadway with a lot of other characteristics legally, and that's just not the case.
Okay.
We reviewed the Pleasure Drive, and there's no specific language to the vegetation roadway.
But as I said, I think as a board, we need to state that, because I just think that there is that misconception amongst a lot of the public that that's what the ordinance covers, because each one of these discussions that's come back or come up numerous times, and it just needs to be clear of what the board's position on that is.
Right. It was a measure that helped to preserve the character of that roadway, but it does not govern all of the hopes and desires of the people that live along that road.
Thank you, sir.
Haven't discussed, and we looked at and talked to the chief about IDOT requirements on roadways. Correct me if I'm wrong, chief. 3 foot minimum on the side and 13 6-inch vertical height. That's for commercial vehicles, so they won't get scrapes such as our fire engines, etc. Now, the recommendation was the canopy raise that for a foot for extra protection or whatever. Otherwise,
And I think what Chief Linnane had
and
referred to
Linnane
was
suggested the same
14.6. If
thing.
there's a viaduct that's under 14.6 in the city, they always put signs up warning the
Right.
trucks. If you're taller than 13.8, then you need to put a warning sign out. So that's what he was referring to.
so there is a IDOT. We have to keep.
Well, IDOT doesn't govern that road, but in general, that's not a bad idea to keep in mind. But the maybe the more important focus is school buses and fire equipment and what clearance they might need.
Yeah, my point was IDOT says that, and then that guarantees clearance for commercial vehicles. Isn't that-
On IDOT roads.
And IDOT
On an
control
IDOT
roads,
road.
yes.
But if it works on an IDOT road, it would work on ours.
And it's a good guide to follow because
Yeah.
those are standards.
Yeah.
Those are national standards that they're going.
Sure.
So, and the other thing that I bring up that you probably saw in the minutes, but the last time the recommendation of the environmental committee, last time we hashed all this out with all these the exact same things, was to go to 3 feet. And Mr. Getz, who was I believe the roads and parks trustee at the time, had commented, and I've also heard, I believe Mr. Steele mentioned it, and I've read it in a couple other places, that you have to accommodate the growth depending on how often you want to do it. and a lot of that shrubbery and bushes and small trees there can grow at 2 to 3 feet a year. So the recommendation we gave to Public Works last time was cut back at least 5 feet from the edge of the road. So whatever guidelines we go with, we have to realize that the day you're done, stuff is growing back. So if you want to keep 3 feet, you need to go back much more than that, unless you want Public Works out there frequently trimming.
Yeah. And I would also add, and I think Anthony's idea is a good one, to go ahead and get this resident involved, but it should never be assumed that we are negotiating what we will be trimming. Okay, that's not a negotiation. It's going to get trimmed the way that is. Either they're doing it, they can do it, or we'll do it. But if they don't do it all the way, then we'll finish it.
So we need a consensus from the board, and I guess, Mark, what's the instrument? Do you put this in writing, in what form, or?
Sure. Is there are you working on a timeline, or this is a spring project, a summer project, a 2022 project?
Well, it's a project we'd like to get wrapped up. It's been sitting on the back burner. It comes forward and then gets kicked back.
Right.
Some of this goes back to 2013.
Is it better to do it before spring bloom, or is it better to see what the circumstances really are once everything is leafed out?
It's probably easier for Public Works to do it now when the vegetation is off the limbs.
Yeah.
So that they can, maneuver and see.
Well, that's for the canopy, but for the side of the road, we probably need to wait, just so that we have something to cut.
Yeah.
And Kyle and I have had some discussions on this in the past, and Kyle, you there? It's that, and I don't know what's in the budget, but Water Services, no, I'm sorry, Ponds Inc., when they did the work, some of the drainage work, had purchased a piece of equipment that goes in the front of their skid steer, which will allow trimming of the brush and otherwise, because a lot of it is not just grass, and there's bushes and small trees, and and I'm certainly back there it's full of buckthorn and honeysuckle and multiflora rose and all kinds of other things, and certainly a lot of black locust, which is growing up fast, that is going to take more than just the bush hog to get through there.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a couple things with that. You're talking where the ComEd poles are, where we had cleared
at least at a minimum, and then down by the I think also by the path there to the south.
So then you got a couple things. Well, first I'll hit the timing on it. It's gonna get cut when we can do it. There's only 2 of us, so we're limited on manpower. But as soon as you get a clear day and we have time to do it, we'll do it. With the brush cutter, Joe, then you're going into past 4 to 6 feet territory. It's village property at that point. So I don't know, for that road, that's just a special circumstance road, I guess. If you go and tell residents that we're only cutting off 4 feet and then we go 6 to 7 feet, is that going to raise issue? But yeah, that's always a budgetary thing that we can do for the finance committee as well.
I have no problem on village property going back more than that, because in the long run, it's going to save us time and money. And I know I have had, when that bike path first went in, I was the environmental trustee when working on that. There was residents going back there and were a bit concerned about the visibility back there, and they kind of wish that you could see to the road back to that walking path a lot of times.
Right.
Safety issues and otherwise back in there. So I have no issue cutting on some of the village property, cutting back the non-high value vegetation that it.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Then I guess we're back to the original question from Mr. Harney. What device do we need to implement this?
Yeah.
Mr. Schuster, how would you recommend? Resolution, ordinance?
Perhaps a resolution adopting a policy. Is there a way to identify I guess identify the different areas of concern or where cutting will take place and where it might go more than the 3 feet off the road? And is that too much detail and it's just going to be left to the eyeball or what?
So like I said, Jeff, and because we did all that paving and the work there, how much of the area that's not owned to the center of the street, so the area where we have legitimate right of way through there, how far does the right of way typically go from the edge of the pavement? I know it meanders and wanders and all that, but I mean, we have some.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen the map of that.
I have.
And it is almost nearly impossible to actually determine where anything is at.
It's different every 10 feet or every 100 yards or something. Isn't that right, Jeff?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it'd take a miracle in order to actually try and delineate all of that. Some of it's a lot easier, like where the new subdivision is up there on the north side, but otherwise it's pretty complicated as far as trying to actually determine where any of that actually is.
Well, all I would say is the last time we came up with a consensus of the board to get Direct Public Works to cut 5 feet off of the edge of the road. And it has gotten lost to time. And so something in writing, a resolution or otherwise, 5 feet seemed like a good number last time. It still does from everything I'm hearing tonight. And then maybe we just say in village property, we cut back as far,
Is there a location other than the northerly end of Sleepy Hollow Road where you expect it to still even be an issue?
Yes.
I mean, you could say, south of Crane, there's houses along there, lilac bushes. So it could potentially be another issue. I would say
my past experience is that Sleepy Hollow Road it really is the signature road of the village, and there is a lot of passion from a lot of residents that don't even live on there to the look and the feel and what happens on Sleepy Hollow Road. So,
well, so some public action at a meeting at least responds to that or addresses that, but. Is there also an idea of sending a direct notice to the people who own the property along the road as to what's then going to occur in an approximate time frame? I've heard some discussion tonight that the owner would be invited to do the work, him or herself, in advance of the village doing anything, for example.
That could be part of the policy that we presented to the board, Mark.
Okay. Well, all right. So some written, a policy addressed to the board would not need an ordinance necessarily or a resolution, just a public discussion and adoption of the written policy.
Okay.
How do we keep that from getting lost to time like the last it has in the past?
Well, let's have a policy written up for the next meeting.
Oh, but I mean, then the policy sticks around. I mean, that was
that's a question for Mr. Killinger and implementation after some period of notification. But if there's a policy by March and notification, promptly after that, you're talking mid-April or something when the village public works department could commence operations.
I guess I'm saying, is there any downside to a resolution?
Oh, no, not at all.
My personal feeling is I would feel more comfortable with resolution. It just seems
that's fine.
Normal.
The question is how and what to write up. Is there some model from before? You've referenced some things, Mr. Nemec.
I was not able to go through there. Tony, were you able to dig up anything from the environmental committee that was recommended, or?
Yes, there's a substantial amount of material there.
All right.
Very redundant over the issue and the participants involved. But there's a lot of material in there, but there was no resolution that I saw. Now, I didn't proof each of the pages. I just got those for Mr.
Sure.
Hardy and
I mean,
Mr. Thorne.
I mean, I'd be happy to take a stab at writing something, if you share that material with me. Unless Mr. Harney wants to, put pen to paper.
My personal faith from what we've done in the past that, minimum of 5 feet to, cut back 5 feet to allow at least 3 feet of clearance from the past discussions. And on village property, whatever wording you would think would be proper, Ed, but I think that, clearing out, I don't want to say invasive because that's such a touchy word nowadays, but non-high value trees and plants, because as you know and I know, some of that stuff that's in, some of that black locust is killing off the oaks and the shagbark hickories and the other stuff we want there. So I think that needs to be incorporated in the policy.
Okay.
What about this height limitation you've talked about? Are there places that you're aware that there's not 13.6 or 14 feet of clearance?
Yes.
Well, we've seen paint on the bottom of the brushes, so.
Well, and the part of Sleepy Hollow Road that we're talking about, what's been trimmed right now is sort of a big half circle, which means that a big enough vehicle that goes down there has to hug the middle of the road not to hit them the way they are now.
That's a good point. I forgot about that. I'm glad you mentioned that. Was the discussion too, is that height limitation should be at the shoulder, not the center.
Yep, all the way
Yeah,
across.
it's good. So that needs to be included in there. Ed, you're being really quiet. I see you nodding. What are your thoughts?
I didn't catch what you asked. The numbers, I think, 5 foot on the side and go with the 14-foot 6-inch on the top.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
What do we want to say as far as on village property then? Do we want to even specify what we're going to do?
Taken back to the maximum. 15 feet, who knows? If it's village owned, if it's village right of way.
Right.
We can go back to the 15 feet.
I would say that we should put in there, and it's probably rightfully so, that every effort should be made to save. And what's the best verbiage for that? The canopy, we definitely want to try and preserve as much as we can, and we also want to save. Do we want to say high value vegetation, high value trees, characteristic trees?
Everybody has different opinion.
Yeah, I'd really rather not get into
Yeah,
that.
how are you gonna determine that?
It'll make people. I will say in our village,
Well,
we do a list of invasive species which are not allowed anywhere. So I mean that may cover it there.
There's lists of those kinds of trees. I don't know if we ever adopted one in the Sleepy Hollow Code. I know Mr. Ander was working on something like that, and I'm not sure how much of that got codified.
We do have some noxious vegetation someplace in there in the nuisance.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, these types of trees are pretty well known and categorized because they crowd out more valuable, more valued trees. If there's not a list in the code, there are lists like that available, readily available.
I would just recommend that for these previous discussions and meetings with public and environmental meetings and otherwise, is that is something that the public is, Sleepy Hollow as a whole is very passionate about. And I think rightfully we own that obligation to preserve that part of Sleepy Hollow Road.
Well, the problem is going to be though, if there's one of the trees that you're talking about preserving that is in the zone where it needs to be cut, what are we going to do?
Needs to be trimmed.
It's going to be the trimming outside of that, or just in the village property too, is kind of where I was going with.
Okay.
I think we're right. If we have a 3 to 5 foot, leeway, then anything within that 3 to 5 foot gets taken down.
Exactly.
The more minutia we put in it, the more, I think, challenges we're gonna get.
Okay.
But the overall general consensus of the board is we'd like to see a resolution at the February 21st meeting.
Why a resolution and why a policy? Why I heard both recommendations. Why do we need to go with a resolution? Or does a policy cover?
I think Joe was concerned that about the long range.
The resolution would be to adopt the policy. And
And this is the third
policy-
time I've had this exact same conversation with this exact same debate. And it just, as a whole in a village, that's one thing I've learned. Looking back, stuff just kind of disappears. So at least as a resolution, it just feels a little more formal, and that has a better chance of, sticking around for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, we'll make a note to put it on the agenda for next week, or the 14th, 21st, I'm sorry.
One of those days.
Right. Yeah, Eugene just found something in the code book, says it says we have the right to remove trees. Yeah, we do. But it doesn't have the specifics on there that it needs to be, so we're partway
Right.
there.
And that's due to liability and danger to vehicle.
And public safety, yeah.
The truck doesn't care if it's something good or something not good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got another item for February 21st. Old business, tree trimming once again.
Sure.
All right. Okay, any other old business to come before the board? No other old business to come before the board? Any new business to come before the board? No new business to come before the board? Item 15.
Second.
Moved by Diatley, seconded by Harney. Motion to adjourn. Roll call, please. Mr. Prano.
Aye.
Mr. Daly.
Aye.
Mr. Harney.
Aye.
Mr. Thorne.
Aye.
Mr. Hoffman.
Aye.
Mr. Nimitz.
Aye.
6 affirmative votes, no negative votes. We are so adjourned. We will see you on the 21st.
Good. Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night, all.
Oh, I forgot. The comments. Mr. Parker wants his newsletter articles by the 10th of February. Did everybody hear that?
What is it?
Parker wants all the newsletter articles by the 10th of February.
Service club got through sent out.
Well, thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes. Mark.
what was that date for a newsletter?
February 10th.
A newsletter would be a good place to put a notice about tree trimming.
I can do it.
Okay, the 10th, what's today?
Today's the
7th?
7th.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm not sure how much detail we can give you for that, but be a good place to put a heads up that it's coming.
Yep.
All right. Okay, good night.
Night.